there. I came here because I heard that you live alone and, well, I need to find a home for Thor here." I looked at the dog, who remained perfectly still next to the police officer, like a golden and black statue. "He seems well trained," I commented, noticing how the animal maintained an erect posture even when relaxed. If you're enjoying this incredible story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters. Trained is an understatement. The sergeant smiled with pride and melancholy. Thor served 8 years in the K9 unit. He participated in more than 200 operations, found drugs worth millions, helped arrest dozens of criminals. But he hesitated, looking at the dog with paternal affection. He developed a behavior that the superiors consider inadequate for service. I frowned, curious. What kind of behavior? He stopped barking during operations, completely. The trainers tried everything, but Thor simply decided he had other methods to communicate. Methods that, well, let's say they're unique. The sergeant scratched his head, clearly trying to find the right words. The problem is that a working dog who doesn't obey standard commands can't continue active. But Thor isn't a common dog, Mr. Miller. He's special. I crouched down slowly, my knees protesting against the movement. Thor immediately focused on me, his ears rising slightly. I extended my hand and he sniffed it delicately, then allowed me to touch his head. His fur was softer than I expected, and I felt a strange calm when petting him. "Why are you offering him to me specifically?" I asked, still petting the dog. "Because I need someone who understands that Thor isn't a common animal. He thinks, plans, solves problems in ways that would leave you impressed. But he also needs someone who respects his, let's say, his strong personality." The sergeant crouched beside me. "I heard from the neighbor, Mrs. Mary, that you're a patient, observant person. Thor needs that. Have you subscribed to the channel yet? Do it now to follow this entire exciting story." At that moment, something happened that should have alerted me to what was coming. A street cat ran past the front yard, chased by a neighborhood stray dog. Thor didn't move, didn't bark, didn't show any typical dog reaction. Instead, he looked fixedly at me, then at the gate fence, and then executed something extraordinary. He walked to my rocking chair on the porch and with surgical precision knocked over my metal watering can that was leaning against it. The metallic noise echoed 3 times, clang, 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 while the watering can bounced on the cement steps. Then Thor returned to our position and sat down, watching me, as if expecting some specific reaction. "My God," I murmured, "he did that on purpose." Sergeant Rodriguez smiled proudly. "Now you're starting to understand. Thor doesn't bark because he developed his own communication system. During operations, he began knocking over objects in specific sequences to alert about different types of danger. The superiors thought it was disobedience, but I knew it was pure intelligence. I spent the rest of the afternoon talking with the sergeant about Thor, learning about his habits, his diet, his peculiarities. The dog remained by my side during the entire conversation, occasionally placing his head on my knee as if he had already decided I was acceptable. "There's something important you need to know," said the sergeant before leaving. "Thor still has all his protection instincts intact. Actually, they became sharper after he retired. If someday he perceives there's real danger around here, he'll alert you. Just pay attention to his way. It won't be barking." That night, after the sergeant left and Thor settled in a corner of the living room, politely rejecting the dog bed that Carol had bought, I kept thinking about the sudden change my life had taken. At 80 years old, after decades working as an accountant, after raising 2 children and losing the wife I loved for 53 years, I had gained a companion who challenged everything I thought I knew about dogs. This story is just beginning. Subscribe to the channel to know what happens in the next chapters. Thor watched me from his strategic position, from where he could simultaneously see the front door, the back door, and the side window. His eyes glowed in the penumbra of the room, alert even when his body seemed relaxed. It was like having a silent bodyguard, a security prototype that worked with algorithms only he understood. "Well, Thor," I said aloud, testing how he would react to the sound of my voice. I think we're going to get along well. He tilted his head slightly, an almost human gesture of agreement, and I knew at that moment that my life had changed forever. I still didn't know that in a few weeks Thor would prove to be more than a companion. He would be my savior, using a communication method that not even the police had managed to decipher completely. The night breeze of New York entered through the open window, bringing the aroma of jasmine from the neighbor's garden and the distant sound of traffic from Atlantic Avenue. It was an apparently common night in Brooklyn Heights, but I felt that something important had begun. Thor sighed softly and closed his eyes, but his ears continued erect, capturing every sound from the neighborhood. Don't miss the next chapter. Subscribe now to the channel and activate the bell to be notified. That first night with Thor, I slept better than I had slept in months. There was something comforting in knowing that those attentive ears and that sharp intelligence were standing guard in my house. I still didn't know that soon I would depend on them to save my own life. The first days with Thor were a true discovery. I woke up on the second day, expecting to find him sleeping in the same place where I had left him the night before, but he wasn't there. I felt a brief moment of panic. Had he escaped? But then I heard a metallic noise coming from the kitchen. I found Thor standing next to the refrigerator, where he had carefully knocked over 3 metal spoons that I kept in a magnetic holder. They were arranged on the floor in a straight line, perfectly spaced. Thor looked at me, and then walked to his empty water bowl. "Ah," I said, understanding immediately. "You're thirsty." It was impressive how he had developed his own communication system. Instead of barking or making typical dog noise, Thor used metallic objects to transmit specific messages. 3 spoons meant basic need: water, food, or going outside for necessities. During that first week, I began to mentally catalogue the different patterns Thor used. When he wanted to go out to the yard, he knocked over the metal food dish twice. When he was bored and wanted attention, he gently pushed the cookie tin I left on the side table. Each action had a purpose, a logic that I slowly learned to decipher. Are you following this incredible story of canine intelligence? Subscribe to the channel. Mrs. Mary, my 65-year-old neighbor who always worried about me since Helen passed away, came to visit me the following Thursday. She arrived with a tray of apple pie, my confessed weakness, and curious eyes to meet my new companion. "Mr. Miller, what a beautiful dog!" she exclaimed upon seeing Thor, who maintained an observation position near the door. "But he's kind of quiet, isn't he?" "Quiet isn't exactly the word," I replied, serving coffee for both of us. "Thor has his own way of communicating." As if wanting to prove my point, Thor walked to the table where we had left the gate keys and pushed them delicately until they fell to the floor with a metallic clink. Then he went to the door and stood there, looking at me expectantly. "He wants me to open the gate," I explained to Mrs. Mary, who widened her eyes in disbelief. "How so?" "He did that on purpose." I got up and went to the window. Outside, the mailman was approaching with his blue USPS truck. Thor had heard the noise long before us and was alerting about the arrival of someone known and harmless. "Thor served in the police for 8 years, I explained while opening the gate for the mailman to deliver an electric bill. "He identifies different types of approach and warns me accordingly." Mrs. Mary was impressed, but also a little apprehensive. "And if it's someone dangerous?" It was a question I myself was curious to have answered, but sincerely hoped never to find out in practice. This story is getting more and more interesting. Have you subscribed to the channel yet? Don't miss the next chapters. The routine I developed with Thor brought a structure to my life that I didn't realize was missing. Every morning at 7 o'clock, he gently knocked over the metal mug I left on the nightstand, his signal for time to wake up. It wasn't aggressive or insistent. It was just information. "Robert, the day has begun." After breakfast, we took our morning walk around the block. Thor always walked on my left side, never pulling the leash, always attentive to sounds and movements around us. The neighbors began to know us as a duo. Mrs. Conception, who had a flower shop on the corner, always greeted us. "Good morning, Mr. Miller." "Good morning, Thor." The dog responded with an almost imperceptible nod of the head, a gesture that made me smile every time. One afternoon, while I was watering the plants in the garden, I noticed something interesting. Thor had separated all the small metallic objects he found around the yard, bottle caps, lost screws, an old key I no longer knew what it opened, and had organized them in small piles under my garden table. Each pile had approximately the same number of items. "What are you doing, boy?" I asked, crouching down to observe better. Thor looked at me with that intelligent expression and then picked up a bottle cap with his mouth, carried it to the first pile and let it drop. The metallic sound echoed once. Then he picked up 2 bottle caps from the second pile and let them fall consecutively. Then 3 from the third pile. It was as if he was teaching me his communication system. 1 sound for one thing, 2 sounds for another, 3 sounds for a third category. It was a code, simple but effective. Is this incredible demonstration of canine intelligence surprising you? Subscribe to the channel to see more. That night I called Carol to tell her about Thor's progress. My daughter, always practical like her mother, listened to everything with interest but also with a hint of skepticism. "Dad, are you sure you're not anthropomorphizing the dog's behavior? Sometimes we see patterns where they don't exist." "Carol," I replied patiently, "I spent 40 years working with numbers, analyzing patterns, identifying logical sequences. I know how to recognize a system when I see one." Thor developed his own language. To prove my point, I knocked 3 times on the metal table next to the phone. Thor immediately got up from his position in the living room and went to his water bowl. I knocked twice. He went to the back door. Once he went to the food bowl. "Do you see?" I said to Carol. "It's consistent. He associates specific numbers of metallic sounds with specific needs or situations." There was silence on the other end of the line. "Dad, that's incredible. I've never heard of a dog that did that." "Neither have I admitted. "But Thor isn't a common dog." After the conversation with Carol, I kept thinking about the responsibility I had assumed. Thor wasn't just a pet. He was an intellectual partner, a being with cognitive abilities that challenged my understanding of animal intelligence. I felt honored to have been chosen to be his companion in this new stage of his life. That night, while we watched television together, me on my favorite couch and Thor on the rug beside it, but always positioned to observe the front door, I reflected on how my life had changed. I no longer felt alone. I had a partner who understood me, who communicated with me in a unique way, who brought purpose and structure to my days. Don't miss this exciting story. Subscribe to the channel to follow all the chapters. What I still didn't know was that all that elaborate communication, that complex system Thor had developed, was being perfected for something much more important than basic need. He was preparing me for a moment when he would need to alert me about real danger, using a language that only the 2 of us would understand. The rain began to fall softly outside, creating a symphony against the house tiles. Thor raised his ears, attentive to the sounds of the night, his police instincts still alert even in retirement. In that moment of domestic peace, neither of us imagined that in a few weeks those instincts would be tested in a way that would change our lives forever. The first sign that something was different in the neighborhood happened on a rainy Tuesday in April. I was in the kitchen preparing my lunch, simple spaghetti with tomato sauce and cheese, the recipe Helen taught me in the first years of marriage, when Thor executed a sequence of movements he had never done before. He went to the cabinet where I keep pots and utensils, specifically chose a wooden spoon and a small iron skillet, and began creating a rhythmic pattern that immediately caught my attention. Tock, tock, wood on skillet. Long pause. Tock, tock, tock. 3 quick taps. Short pause. Tock. 1 strong tap. "Thor, what's wrong, boy?" I asked, leaving the stove and approaching him. The dog stopped immediately, looked at me with intensity, and then repeated exactly the same sequence. 2 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Pause. 1 tap. Then he walked to the kitchen window, which faced the backyard, and stood in alert position. I followed his gaze and saw nothing abnormal. The neighbor's yard was empty, except for the clothesline, with clothes swaying in the fine rain. But Thor continued tense, his ears erect, capturing something my 80-year-old ears couldn't detect. Is this incredible demonstration of intelligence impressing you? Subscribe to the channel to not miss any detail. In the following days, I began paying closer attention to Thor's behavior patterns. I realized he had developed different codes for different situations. The 2-3-1 tap pattern only happened when he detected something he considered suspicious in the surroundings of the house. It was different from his signal for the mailman, 1 long tap followed by 2 short ones, or for known visitors, 3 spaced taps. Mrs. Mary confirmed my suspicion when she came for coffee on a Thursday afternoon. She arrived visibly worried, carrying her purse tighter than usual against her body. "Mr. Miller," she said as soon as she sat down, "there have been some strange things happening here in the block. Mrs. Silver back on the other street says she saw a man prowling around the houses at dawn. It wasn't anyone known from the neighborhood." I felt a chill in my stomach. What kind of man? Young, thin, with a backpack on his back. She said he would stand in front of houses as if he were studying them. Mrs. Mary looked nervously at Thor, who had positioned himself near the living room window. And it wasn't just her who saw him. Mr. John from the bakery says there was strange movement near Dr. Perez's house, too. That's when everything began to make sense. Thor had detected those suspicious presences long before the neighbors reported anything. His communication system wasn't just a curiosity. It was a highly sophisticated security system developed through 8 years of police training and refined by his natural intelligence. Are you realizing how this story is getting tense? Subscribe to the channel to follow. That night, I decided to test a theory. After dinner, when I would normally settle into the armchair to watch the news, I went to the kitchen and took a metal spoon. I tapped the pattern Thor had shown me. 2 taps, pause, 3 taps, pause, 1 tap. His reaction was immediate and impressive. Thor got up alertly, went to the front window and began a systematic patrol of the house. He visited each window, each door, checked every possible entry point. Then he returned to me and looked at me as if saying, "Message received and verified, all secure for now." "My God," I murmured to myself, "you're teaching me your language." During the following days, I observed attentively every movement of Thor. I began to perceive nuances I had missed before. When he wanted water, he knocked over metallic objects in linear sequence, one after another in a straight line. When he was alerting about something suspicious, the objects were arranged in more complex patterns, sometimes in triangle or semicircle shapes. It was as if he had created not just a language, but a language with grammar, with different structures for different types of information. A week after the conversation with Mrs. Mary, Thor executed a variation of the alert signal that left me particularly worried. It was round 10 at night, and I was preparing to sleep when I heard the familiar sequence of metallic sounds coming from the kitchen. But this time, there was something different. After the usual 2-3-1 pattern, he added a series of 5 quick and sharp taps. The tension is increasing. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it now. I went to the kitchen and found Thor in maximum alert state. His muscles were tense, his ears completely erect, and he alternated his gaze between the back door and the side window. He had knocked over not just spoons, but also pot lids, creating a metallic cacophony that seemed urgent. I turned off all the house lights and carefully approached the side window, the same one from which Thor wouldn't look away. The yard was plunged in the typical darkness of New York night. But there was something different, a shadow that moved near the back fence, trying to stay out of reach of the streetlight. My heart raced. There was someone in my yard. Thor positioned himself beside me, completely silent but alert. I understood at that moment why the police had had difficulty with his new communication method. A dog that barks can alert both the owner and the invader. But Thor had developed a system that alerted only who needed to be alerted, maintaining the element of surprise. The shadow continued moving, and I realized the person was testing the ground floor windows, checking if any were unlocked. It was exactly the type of behavior the neighbors had reported, someone studying the houses, looking for vulnerabilities. I picked up the phone with trembling hands and dialed 911. While waiting for the call to connect, Thor executed another sequence, this time using only a spoon, tapping a Morse pattern I didn't completely understand, but that transmitted absolute urgency. 911, what's your emergency? Said the operator's voice. Good evening, my name is Robert Miller. Someone is invading my yard at 247 Maple Street, Brooklyn Heights. I can see the person outside. While providing information to the operator, I continued observing through the window. The shadow had stopped near the back door and seemed to be manipulating something, possibly trying to force the lock. Is this moment of tension making your heart race? Subscribe to the channel. Thor remained by my side the entire time, alert but controlled. He didn't emit any sound that could alert the invader about our presence or about the fact that we had already detected his approach. It was pure military strategy. Observe, communicate silently, wait for the right moment to act. The police car arrived about 10 minutes later, but when the officers made a complete round of the property, they found no one. The marks on the back door, however, confirmed my story. There were fresh scratches on the wood around the lock, clear evidence of an attempted break-in. "You were lucky, sir," said one of the officers, a young man of about 25 years. "Whoever it was fled when they realized they had been detected, probably when you turned on the house lights." But I knew the truth was different. The invader had fled because Thor had a detection system that worked long before any light was turned on. My companion had saved me from a situation that could have ended very badly for an 80-year-old man living alone. That night, after the police left and I carefully locked all doors and windows, I sat in the living room with Thor by my side. He had saved my property, and possibly my life, using a communication method that not even police trainers had managed to understand completely. "Thank you, boy," I said, petting his head. "Thank you for taking care of me." Thor looked at me with those intelligent eyes, and then executed a simple pattern with his paw, tapping 3 times on the floor. One strong tap, followed by 2 softer ones. It was the first time I saw him use paws instead of metallic objects. I had the impression it meant something like, "You're welcome, partner. That's what I'm here for. Don't miss the next chapter of this exciting story. Subscribe to the channel now." After that incident, my relationship with Thor changed completely. He was no longer just a companion. He had become my security partner, my personal alert system. But what impressed me most was how he began to refine his communication method even further, as if he realized we would need a more sophisticated system to deal with future threats. The morning after the incident, I found Thor in the kitchen, meticulously organizing all the metallic utensils in the house. He had separated spoons, forks, knives, only the blunt-tipped ones I noticed, pot lids, and even small objects like paper clips he had found around the house. Each category was grouped in a different area of the kitchen floor. "What are you doing, Thor?" I asked, fascinated by this demonstration of organization. He looked at me and then began a lesson I would never forget. He picked up a spoon, always started with spoons, and let it drop once. Then he led me to the water bowl. He repeated with 2 spoons, led me to the food bowl. 3 spoons led me to the back door. But then came the new part. He picked up a fork and let it drop once, led me to the front window. Twice with the fork led me to the side window. 3 times to the back window. This demonstration of intelligence is incredible. If you're following, subscribe to the channel. "Forks are for windows," I murmured, beginning to understand. "Spoons for basic needs." Thor confirmed my hypothesis with that almost human nod of the head. Then he picked up a pot lid, a larger object, which made more noise, and let it drop once. He led me to the front door. It was obvious. Pot lids were for doors, the main entry points. We spent the entire morning in that communication class. Thor taught me that knives, always the blunt-tipped ones, were his code for danger. 1 dropped knife meant attention, 2 meant alert, 3 meant immediate danger. The system was brilliant in its simplicity. Spoons for basic needs, forks for specific windows, lids for doors, knives for threat levels. And the number of dropped objects indicated specifications within each category. "Thor," I said when we finished the lesson, "you're smarter than many humans I've known." He looked at me with that expression I had learned to interpret as satisfaction, the canine equivalent of a proud smile. During the following weeks, I tested the system religiously. I discovered that Thor had developed even more sophisticated nuances. For example, if he dropped 2 forks but positioned them at different angles, it meant there was suspicious movement at 2 windows simultaneously. If the knives were left in a straight line, danger was approaching. If they were arranged in a circle, danger was surrounding the house. Is this canine intelligence surprising you? Subscribe to the channel to see more. Carol came to visit me on a Saturday and was impressed with the demonstration. I asked her to hide behind the backyard fence, pretending to be an intruder. Thor immediately detected her presence and executed the sequence. 2 forks to indicate the back window, followed by 1 knife to indicate basic attention, not real danger, because he recognized Carol's scent. "Dad, this is extraordinary," she said, after returning inside the house. "I've never seen anything like it. You should document this, maybe call someone from the university to study his behavior." "No," I replied immediately. "Thor developed this system to protect me. I don't want to turn him into a study object. Besides," I added with a smile, "I fear that if other people discover how it works, that could compromise our security." It was a real concern. Thor's method worked because it was unique, silent, and incomprehensible to strangers. If someone with bad intentions discovered the pattern, they could try to neutralize it. One May afternoon, Thor executed a sequence that left me particularly worried. It was a sunny Thursday. I was pruning the roses in the garden when I heard a cacophony of metal coming from the kitchen. I ran inside and found a complex arrangement. 3 knives arranged in a triangle, high danger, 2 forks pointing to different windows, movement in multiple directions, and 4 pot lids stacked, multiple entry attempts. "My God, Thor," I murmured, "what's happening?" I followed him to the front window and saw something that chilled my blood. There were 2 men on the street. A thin young man who matched the description Mrs. Mary had given weeks earlier, and an older man, apparently more experienced. They weren't just observing my house, they were making notes in a small notebook. The tension is increasing. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now to not miss anything. Thor had detected not just 1, but 2 individuals doing reconnaissance of my property. His system had evolved to communicate more complex situations. Multiple simultaneous threats. I discreetly called the police once more, but when the patrol arrived, the men had already left. The officer who attended to me, the same young man from the previous time, seemed a bit skeptical. "Mr. Miller, are you sure you weren't imagining things? Sometimes, at our age—" He stopped, realizing he had said something inappropriate. "Officer," I replied with the dignity that 80 years of life provided me, "I may be elderly, but my mind works perfectly. And besides, I wasn't the only one who saw them. My dog also detected their presence." The officer looked at Thor, who remained alert near the window, and something in his professional posture changed. "You said this is an ex-police dog." 8 years in the K9 unit, I confirmed. "Retired, but the instincts remain intact." The officer's attitude changed completely. "In that case, sir, I'm going to take your report very seriously. Police dogs don't give false alarms. If Thor detected something, it's because there was something to detect." That night, Thor executed another pattern I didn't know. He organized all the metallic objects in the house into a kind of map on the living room floor. It was as if he was showing me a defense plan, indicating vulnerable points and protection strategies. I began to understand that we weren't dealing with a random robbery attempt. The men Thor had detected were doing careful, professional reconnaissance. This suggested that I had become a specific target of someone, not just a casual opportunity. "Thor," I said, kneeling beside my companion, "I need you to keep me safe. I don't know why they chose our house, but I know I can count on you." He looked at me with that deep intelligence that still impressed me, and then executed the simplest pattern of all, a single tap with his paw on the floor. It was his way of saying, "Yes, you can count on me." Is this incredible partnership between man and dog moving you? Subscribe to the channel. That night, I slept little. Thor also remained alert, making silent rounds through the house every 2 hours. His communication system had evolved from a curiosity to a real survival necessity. And I had the feeling that soon it would be tested in a way that neither of us was completely prepared to face. The rain began to fall outside, creating a sound curtain that could mask the approach of ill-intentioned people. Thor positioned himself strategically in the living room, from where he could monitor all entry points. His ears moved constantly, capturing sounds that were beyond my perception. It was like having my own military security system living with me. And I was beginning to suspect that soon we would discover exactly how effective that system could be. The night that would change our lives forever arrived on a cold Friday in June. There was a tension in the air that I felt in my bones, that type of premonition that 80 years of life had taught me not to ignore. Thor was also more alert than usual, executing security checks every hour since early afternoon. At 9 at night, while watching the national news, Thor executed a sequence that made me stop everything immediately. He had gone to the kitchen and created the most complex arrangement I had ever seen. 5 knives arranged in a star, extreme danger. All the forks in the house pointing to different windows, movement in all directions, and 2 pot lids stacked near the back door. "Thor," I whispered, "how many people?" He looked at me and then executed something new. He tapped 5 times on the floor with his paw, stopped, and tapped 3 times. 5 plus 3, 8 people. My blood froze. It was no longer 1 or 2 people doing reconnaissance. It was a large, organized group, and they were positioning themselves around my house. Is this extreme danger situation making you tense? Subscribe to the channel to know how it ends. I picked up the phone to call the police, but Thor immediately came to me and gently but firmly pushed the device from my hand. Then he led me to the living room window and made a gesture I didn't expect. He put his paw on my mouth, the universal signal for silence. It was then that I understood. Thor had detected that the group was monitoring the house. Any phone call, any obvious movement could accelerate their action. He wanted me to wait, to trust in the plan that his military strategic mind was developing. Thor silently guided me to the armchair in the living room, made me sit, and then executed a demonstration that was forever engraved in my memory. He went to each window of the house, checked each door, and then returned to me. Using only gestures with his paws and body movements, he communicated a plan to me. First, he showed me that I should remain exactly where I was. Then, using his metal bowl, he demonstrated that when the right moment came, he would sound a specific alarm. 5 quick and loud taps. That would be my signal to call the police. "You want me to wait for your signal?" I whispered. He confirmed with that nod of the head. It was military strategy. Let the enemy think they have the advantage, that they haven't been detected, and then use that false confidence against them. Is Thor's strategic intelligence impressing you? Subscribe to the channel. Around 10:30, the tests began. I heard subtle noises, someone testing the back door lock, the sound of careful steps in the side yard, the almost imperceptible creaking of someone trying to force a window. Thor detected every movement, but didn't react. He remained in the living room with me, alert but apparently calm, as if he were just a common domestic dog. The genius of his strategy became clear. The invaders thought they had an easy target, an elderly man alone with a dog that didn't bark or give obvious alarms. They had no idea they were being monitored by a tactical operations specialist who had spent 8 years studying exactly this type of situation. At 12:15, Thor executed the signal. Clang, 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 clang. 5 loud and unmistakable metallic taps echoed through the house. I grabbed the phone immediately. 911, what's your emergency? Emergency, I whispered urgently. Robert Miller, 247 Maple Street, Brooklyn Heights. 8 invaders trying to enter my house now. Repeat, 8 invaders. Operation in progress. Sir, are you sure of the number? I have absolute certainty. My dog is ex-police. He detected 8 people in tactical positions around the house. The mention of the ex-police dog completely changed the tone of the conversation. Units on the way, sir. Stay in a safe location and on the line. Thor had timed it perfectly. At the exact moment I finished the call, I heard the unmistakable sound of the back door being forced. They had decided it was time to act. Is this high-tension moment taking your breath away? Continue following, subscribe to the channel. What happened in the next minutes was a demonstration of tactical intelligence that left me impressed even in the middle of danger. Thor didn't run to confront the invaders. Instead, he executed a psychological confusion strategy. First, he went to the kitchen and began knocking over metallic objects in random sequences. Not the organized patterns I knew, but metal cacophonies that echoed throughout the house in apparently chaotic ways. The sound came from all directions, creating the impression that there were multiple people or animals moving through the house. Then he began moving through the shadows, appearing briefly at one window, then another, then at the living room door, creating the illusion that there were multiple dogs in the house. The invaders, who expected to find a defenseless elderly man with a common domestic animal, suddenly found themselves in a situation they couldn't understand. I heard confused voices coming from the backyard. How many dogs are in this house, man? Wasn't there supposed to be just one? All this noise. There are people awake in here. Something's wrong, let's get out. But then I heard a firmer voice, apparently from the group leader. Calm down, guys. It's just an old man and a dog. We continue. It was when Thor executed the final phase of his plan. He returned to me in the living room and executed a pattern he had never done before. He quickly organized all the small metallic objects in the room in a straight line pointing toward the front door. Then he looked at me and delicately placed his paw on my hand. It was his way of saying, now we wait together. The cavalry is coming. The tension is at maximum. If you're following this incredible story, subscribe to the channel. At 12:32, I heard the most beautiful sound in the world, police sirens approaching. Multiple units from the sound they made. The invaders' reaction was immediate. I heard running, shouting, the sound of people jumping fences and fleeing in different directions. Some tried to exit through the front gate and encountered the police cars that were already positioned on the street. Thor remained with me the entire time, calm but alert, monitoring every sound, every movement. Only when we heard the officer's voice shouting, "Police! House secure!" did he relax and go to the front door, indicating to me that it was safe to open. I found the same young officer from the previous time, but now accompanied by a more experienced sergeant and a complete team of officers. "Mr. Miller," said the sergeant, "we managed to arrest 4 of the invaders. The others fled, but we already have teams searching the area. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, thanks to Thor," I replied, petting my companion. The sergeant observed Thor with professional respect. "Sergeant Ribeiro, 78th Precinct. I heard this is Thor, ex-K9 from the unit. He's a legend in our circles." Thor positioned himself at attention, a reflex from his years of service, and the sergeant returned the gesture with a respectful salute. "Thor," said the sergeant, "you did exemplary work here today. You saved your partner's life and helped arrest a gang that had been operating in the area for months." It was then that I learned the truth. I hadn't been chosen randomly. The gang had selected me specifically because I was elderly, lived alone, and they had information that I kept money at home. False information, but sufficient to make me a target. Is this heroic story moving you? Subscribe to the channel to see the exciting ending. Thor had detected the entire reconnaissance process, had developed a defense strategy, and had executed a plan that not only protected me, but helped capture criminals who threatened the entire neighborhood. That night, after the police left and the house returned to silence, I sat in the living room with Thor by my side. He had saved my life using a communication system that no canine training manual had ever documented. "Thor," I said with tears in my eyes, "you're not just my companion, you're my hero." He looked at me with those intelligent eyes and executed the simplest pattern of all, a single soft tap with his paw on the floor. It was his way of saying, "We're partners, Robert." That's what partners do for each other. The days that followed that night of terror brought profound changes to our routine. The story of how Thor had used his unique communication system to save me spread quickly through Brooklyn Heights and soon gained attention far beyond our neighborhood. On the following Monday, Sergeant Ribeiro returned to my house, but it wasn't an official visit. He arrived in the late afternoon, off duty, carrying a bag of premium dog food. "Mr. Miller," he said, taking off his cap and smiling, "I came here to personally thank Thor. Thanks to his work on Friday, we managed to dismantle a gang that operated in 3 different neighborhoods. The 4 we arrested talked, and we were already able to locate the others." Thor received the sergeant with that respectful posture he reserved for people he recognized as military family. They greeted each other with touching formality, the sergeant saluting and Thor positioning himself at attention. "But I came here for another reason too," continued the sergeant. "The story of what happened reached the ears of the precinct commander. He would like to meet Thor personally. Is this recognition story moving you? Subscribe to the channel to follow. On Wednesday, we received an official visit I will never forget. A patrol car stopped in front of the house, and from it descended a man of about 50 years, imposing military bearing, wearing an impeccable uniform. It was Commander Santos, chief of the Brooklyn K-9 unit. "Mr. Robert Miller," he introduced himself formally. "Commander Santos. I came to personally meet Thor and thank him for services rendered to the community." Thor immediately assumed a tension position, as if the years of retirement had disappeared in an instant. It was evident that he recognized military hierarchy and responded instinctively to it. "Thor," said the commander in a firm but affectionate voice, "8 years of exemplary service, more than 200 successful operations, and now, in retirement, you continue serving and protecting. That's what I call a true soldier." The commander then did something that moved me deeply. He took a medal from his pocket, a commendation for exceptional services, and placed it around Thor's neck. "This medal," he explained, "is awarded to military personnel who demonstrate exceptional courage and intelligence in dangerous situations. Thor deserves it not only for what he did on Friday, but for an entire career of dedication." At that moment, I felt immense pride for my companion. He wasn't just my dog, he was a decorated hero, a military veteran recognized for his services. What an emotional moment. If you're following this story, subscribe to the channel. But the biggest surprise came when the commander addressed me. "Mr. Miller, I would like to make an invitation. The department is developing a support program for elderly people living alone, using retired K-9 dogs. The communication method that Thor developed with you revolutionized our understanding of K-9 intelligence. We would like you to be our ambassadors in this project." The proposal was touching. Thor and I would visit other elderly people, teaching them to recognize and develop similar communication systems with their K-9 companions. It would be a way to transform our experience into something that could benefit others. "Commander," I replied, "it would be an honor, but only if Thor agrees." We all looked at Thor, who observed us with that characteristic intelligence. He got up, went to his metal bowl and tapped once, strong and clear. It was his unmistakable signal for yes. In the following weeks, our life gained a completely new purpose. We began visiting other seniors who had adopted retired police dogs. It was impressive to discover that many of these animals had developed unique forms of communication, each adapted to the personality and needs of their new human companion. Is this transformation inspiring you? Subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories. Mrs. Alzira, a 75-year-old lady who lived in Park Slope, had been paired with Rex, a retired Labrador specialist in explosive detection. Rex had developed a system based on body positions. When he detected suspicious movement, he positioned himself in different places in the house to indicate the direction of the threat. Mr. Joachim, an 82-year-old widower who lived in Queens, had Duke as a companion, a Belgian shepherd who had created a color-based communication system. Duke organized colored toys in different patterns to transmit specific information, a form of visual communication that worked perfectly for his companion, who had hearing difficulties. Each couple we visited was unique, but all shared the same element, a deep connection between human and animal that transcended traditional communication methods. It was as if these retired dogs had developed a superior form of empathy, adapting perfectly to the needs of their new homes. During one of our visits, we met Maria Clara, a retired psychologist of 78 who had adopted Luna, a German shepherd specialist in search and capture. Maria Clara made an observation that was engraved in my memory. Robert, these dogs didn't lose their professional abilities when they retired. They adapted them. The intelligence they used to protect society, now they use to protect their adoptive families. It's the same dedication, the same professionalism, just applied on an individual scale. She was right. Thor hadn't stopped being a police dog. He had become my personal police dog. Is this reflection on dedication touching you? Subscribe to the channel. 6 months after that terrible night that could have ended tragically, our routine had completely transformed. 3 times a week, Thor and I went out for official visits of the police program. On other days, we received people interested in learning about communication with retired dogs. Our story gained media attention. A reporter from CBS made a feature about our case on 60 Minutes, showing how Thor demonstrated his communication system. The interest was so great that we received letters from all over America, from people wanting to adopt retired dogs or learn similar techniques. Carol was impressed with the transformation that had occurred in my life. "Dad," she said during one of her visits, "I've never seen you so animated and full of purpose. It's like you found a new career at 80 years old." And that's exactly what it was. Thor had not only saved my life that frightening night, he had given me a new reason to live. Together, we were making a difference in other people's lives, sharing a discovery that could revolutionize the way elderly humans relate to companion animals. One afternoon, while we relaxed in the garden after a particularly rewarding visit, I looked at Thor and realized how extraordinary our journey together had been. What began as a casual encounter had transformed into a partnership that saved not only my life, but gave new meaning to our golden years. "Thor," I said, petting his head while he observed the flowers I had planted in the exact spot where he had made his first demonstration of intelligence months ago. "You know you completely changed my life, don't you?" He looked at me with those wise eyes and executed a pattern that had become our most intimate form of communication. 3 gentle taps with his paw on my knee, followed by a contented sigh. It was his way of saying, "And you changed mine too, Robert." The truth was that we had both found a second chance in life. Thor had discovered that his military talents could be applied in an even more meaningful way, protecting and caring for not only me, but helping an entire community of seniors feel safer and more connected. I had discovered that at 80 years old I was still capable of contributing to the world, of making a difference in other people's lives. The program we developed with the NYPD grew beyond our most optimistic expectations. In less than a year, more than 50 pairs of elderly people and retired dogs had been formed in New York City. and the model was being replicated in other American cities. This incredible story of partnership and dedication is coming to an end. If you were moved by this journey, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories. During an official ceremony held at the precinct to celebrate the program's success, Commander Santos gave a speech that moved me deeply. What Robert and Thor taught us goes far beyond animal communication techniques. They showed us that retirement doesn't mean the end of purpose. It means transformation of purpose. That old age isn't synonymous with vulnerability, it's synonymous with experience. And that true intelligence isn't just about solving problems, but about adapting, growing, and continuing to serve in always new ways. Today, 2 years after that first morning when Thor came into my life, I can say with certainty that I found my best friend, my protector, my partner, and my purpose. Our daily routine continues structured by the metallic signals that only the two of us understand completely. But now, those signals represent much more than communication. They represent trust, love, and a type of partnership that transcends species. Every night before sleeping, Thor makes his security round through the house. But now, when he finishes, he comes to my room and executes one last signal, a gentle tap on the door, followed by 3 contented sighs. It's his way of saying, "All secure, Robert. You can rest in peace." And every night I respond the same way. "Thank you, my friend. Sleep well, you too." Because that's what we do for each other. We care, we protect, and we find together ways to make each day a little better than the previous one. Thor didn't just save my life using a trick that even the police didn't know. He gave me a new life, full of purpose, friendship, and the certainty that no matter the age, we can always find ways to make a difference in the world. This was the story of Robert and Thor, proof that the best companions arrive when we least expect them and in ways we least imagine. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and share it with someone who needs to know that it's never too late to start over. Thank you so much for following this journey with us.